Welcome, everybody, to September 4th, 1966. We are all at TriCon in Cleveland, or as you colloquially call it, CoKoCon for some reason. And we're going to be discussing this amazing year of 1966, the year I would say that science fiction has truly gotten modern. And so you understand the conceit of what we're doing. If you connect to your little timeshare, I understand you folks in the future have the ability to connect to OmniVac or Google Vac or some sort of Vac giant computer. If you type in galacticjourney.org, you will see what this is all about. I'll wait. Galactic Journey is a bunch of fans living exactly 55 years time shifted from you folks, day by day. So last year it was 65, next year it will be 67, and this Labor Day weekend is particularly exciting for a number of reasons. It's just a confluence of science fiction amazingness, and we're going to talk about it, but we also want to answer your questions. Historically, this panel has been an audience-guided event. Now, I don't have the ability to see the questions, so I'm hoping our wonderful backstage technician will ask some of the really good ones. But let me introduce you, our panel.
Pass them along when needed.
I appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
So to my left, we have Lorelei, who has written for the Journey since she was 11, and now she's older than 11. And she's a talented artist, illustrator, and writer, and knows everything about television in this in the first half of this decade. We have Jason Sachs, who literally wrote the book on comic books, and has even come around and seen the light and appreciates Marvel now, despite his misguided ways in the past. He also just saw, as you can tell, Fantastic Voyage, which he has a poster of behind him. We have the amazing Cora Bullitt, who is a Hugo finalist, at least in one time zone. And she is not only our expert on German affairs, but just science fiction in general, particularly of the pulpy swashbuckling variety. We have Janice Newman, who is the editor of Galactic Journey and also an occasional article writer. Every single typo, every single grammatical mistake that you see on Galactic Journey is her fault, because
That's right.
She
It's all my
failed
fault.
to catch it.
But just think of all the ones that you've never seen because I caught them.
Yes, and it's true. There's a lot. Unfortunately, Erica Frank could not be here with us today. She is sick. But at least due to the miracle of Telstar and Syncom, we have everybody here today. So let's get right into it. Probably the most amazing thing that is happening as we speak 55 years ago is the announcement of who has won the Hugo Awards. So let's start at the top about who won and why that's amazing and who they were fighting against and what that means in the significance of our time. So let's start with Best Novel. The Best Novel winners were Dune by Frank Herbert, which some of you folks in the future may be aware of, and Call Me Conrad by Roger Zelazny, which some of you in the future may have absolutely no idea what that is. So for the folks who have read both, raise your hands if you've read both. So Cora, since you're here, which one do you, they were competing against, by the way, Robert Heinlein's A Moon is a Harsh Mistress and Skylark Duquesne's by Doc Smith, who just passed away a few months ago, by the way. And what was the last one on the best novel list?
Squares of the City by John Brunner,
That's
which
right.
I haven't read. Apparently it's not
science
chess.
fiction, which is why I forgot it.
Hal
So
said he's read and reviewed both of those. And he has no
In the
webcam
chat.
to wave. Yes.
Oh, fantastic. So Cora, tell us of those five, which one you thought should have won, and if you're surprised with the choices.
I'm not surprised at all that Dune won because it was very, very popular. I know that you're not a big fan. I kind of liked it. It had its moments, but yes, it was a little long, and I think it's an interesting work. But in the end, my favorite was actually the Zelazny and Call Me Conrad. And I found this best novel ballad a little underwhelming anyway. I haven't read Squares of the City. Apparently it's barely science fiction. Skylark Duquesne was basically nominated because there were no Hugos in the 1930s and 40s when Doc Smith would actually have been relevant. And I'm not a fan of The Moon is a Harsh Mistress. Great title, great premise, not a way too much political blathering and weird sex. So, okay, actually none of those were my favorite. I would have gone with Stormbringer by Michael Moorcock, which was nominated due to be coming out in the UK, and The Rissian Terror by Damon Knight, which I liked a lot, but apparently not a lot of people read because it was an ace double.
So, Lorelei, you read Moon is a Harsh Mistress. What did you think of it?
I actually enjoyed it a lot. I read it without any pretenses or knowing what it was, and I haven't read any other of Heinlein's work before, so this was a first. And I actually really enjoyed seeing all of the technical aspects of it, all the politics, but also seeing the interesting social constructs that formed on the moon and how that functioned and how it's different from how Earth functions. I felt like the characters were quite compelling, and it had a fun adventure plot. And I'd say overall, I think the concept of Mike, the living computer, was pretty revolutionary in how Heinlein handled it, and something that I haven't encountered before. So I actually quite enjoyed it.
What's interesting is the Heinlein probably did not win, not because people didn't like it, but because it was a protest vote. Moon is a Harsh Mistress was serialized in IF, and it only started at the end of last year, finished mostly this year, and a lot of people didn't vote for it because they felt it wasn't eligible. So Heinlein probably lost his bite at that apple. But I will tell you, looking at our choices for Galactic Stars, because we give our own awards every year, this wasn't a great year for science fiction, but there was some good stuff across the pond that evaded notice, probably because we're a very Americo-centric awards, even though WorldCom was in England last year. So for instance, Thomas Burnett Swan writes really interesting science fiction-y fantasy versions of fables and myths, and he didn't even get noticed. All right, moving on to best story.
I wanna speak up if I may.
Go for it.
For my favorite author.
Oh yes, go ahead. Go ahead.
And I thought, although written in 1963, that published in 1965, Dr. Blood Money, or How We Got Along After the Bomb, I thought was magnificent, completely disturbing and completely warm. Left me with such a warm feeling inside. It's one of the most Phil Dickian books, to coin a phrase, I've ever read, because this horrible event happens and all it does is bring humanity closer together in this very, very specifically strange way. It really is just a magnificent magnum opus, and probably about a third of the size of Dune in terms of length.
Most things are a third of the size of Dune, including the San Diego telephone directory. Yeah, Philip K. Dick is interesting, and Jason is our expert. As you know, the 60s right now are the time of psychological experimentation. LSD is about to become illegal, so enjoy it while you can. Tune in, turn on, drop out, and read some Philip K. Dick. Moving on to the short stories, the winner was Harlan Ellison, and I understand that was because otherwise he probably would have broken someone's kneecaps. What short story would you have nominated, Jason?
I have to opt out of this category. Unfortunately, I haven't been reading my journals as much as I should be.
Cora, I know what your favorite's going to be.
Well, my favorite of the ones which were actually nominated was Stardock by Fritz Leiber, because I'm a big fan of Fritz Leiber, in particular of his Fafard and Grey Mouser stories, of which series, of which Stardock was one. And actually, I do hope that Fafard and the Grey Mouser eventually do get a bite at the Hugo apple with some future story, because they get nominated almost every year and never win, which is a pity. It's probably due to the anti-fantasy bias among the Hugo electorate, because those stories are just fantastic. And anyway, I'm also sad that this one wasn't up for the special Best Series award, because Fafard and Grey Mouser is a great series. It has been going for 27 years now, started in 1939, and it didn't even get a chance at chance at this one of Best Series award. Well, I hope maybe they will do the Best Series again, and Fritz Leiber will still be around and writing by then to be able to get one eventually. I mean, he has enough Hugos, but he doesn't have one for Fafard and Grey Mouser yet. And other stories, I really like Still in the Song, which is also it's called Deal with the Damned, which is also a kind of sword and sorcery story, and it was published in Fantastic, and it wasn't even nominated, so I enjoyed it a whole lot.
And it was a Zelazny story, so that may be part of it. So understand, in 66, fantasy is actually coming in a big way. Cora talks about a bias against fantasy, but I think that's about to be swept aside for a number of reasons. One, Donald Wollheim of Ace just published Lord of the Rings in cheap paperback for the first time. And as a result, Lord of the Rings has taken the world by storm. And by the way, whatever anyone might say, ultimately the result was a happy one for everyone. Tolkien got $9,000 in royalties and endorsed them, although he's now having Ballantine publish an official set. So between Lord of the Rings and Tarzan is being reprinted, Edgar Rice Burroughs is making a huge comeback right now. Conan is making a huge comeback. Lancer is publishing a bunch of Robert E. Howard's Conan stories with the help and creative adaptation by Lynn Carter and L. Sprague de Camp. Or is it Lester Del Rey? I always get the two.
It's L. Sprague de Camp, supposedly. Okay. I like the Conan stories a lot, the originals. I do hope they won't have L. Sprague de Camp, and especially Lynn Carter, mess too much with them, because I just had the misfortune of reviewing a book by Lynn Carter, and well, that's not an experience. Yeah, it's not an experience I would care to repeat or have visited upon Conan, because Lynn Carter is probably a lovely person.
Read Cora's review of the latest Lynn Carter book, because it is hysterical.
Hal interjects. He said his favorite short story from 1966 is Bob Shaw's Light of the Other Days, and it's up for the Nebula.
If it came out this year, then it will be up for next year, and we probably liked it. I think it sounds familiar. It probably came out in New Worlds or Science Fantasy. Cora talks about Best Series, and this is the first year that they've done a Best Series Hugo. Interestingly enough, the Tricon committee was hoping that Lord of the Rings would get the nod. And instead, surprisingly, to everyone, including the person who penned them, Isaac Asimov's Foundation won Best Series. So the choices were Foundation, Mars, Edgar Rice Burroughs' Mars, the Lensman story, so Smith was on there twice, Heinlein's Future History stories, and Lord of the Rings and Foundation. Janice, which of those would you have picked to win?
Of Lord of the Rings, Foundation, and which ones?
Lensman, Heinlein's Future History, and the Mars series, the Barsoom John Carter.
I haven't read enough of the different of those to make a fair choice. So I can't really weigh in on that category.
Jason?
It's a heart and head thing for me. I think Foundation trilogy is so outstanding and so well thought through. Just a brilliant portrayal of mankind's evolution. It really appeals to my head. But when I was younger than Lorelei, I had a wonderful winter of reading all the Barsoom books in front of a blazing fireplace at our old house. And I just fell in love with that world and those characters. So I have to go with the classic Edgar Rice Burroughs books.
Cora?
Well, I love Foundation. I read it when they came out in magazine form several, so that was 20 years ago, or more than 20 years ago. And I've been a huge fan of Asimov ever since. Sadly, he doesn't write a lot of fiction anymore. It's mostly non-fiction, which is a pity. Apparently, he was involved with the Fantastic Voyage film. I hope it will be good. So that was my favorite. As Lord of the Rings, I read it when it came out in hardcover, so it's not really a recent work for me. It's an amazing work. It's an amazing feat of world building, and And Tolkien is actually a professor in Oxford, and he's a professor of linguistics, and so he created the whole languages, and I'm also an occasional linguist, so I'm really impressed by this work, but simply I love Foundation more. Basum is another one I really loved as a kid, but maybe not quite as much as Foundation. Also, they're wonderful, but they are kind of dated. Heinlein Future History is, I have to admit, I'm not a huge Heinlein fan. Some of it is good, but it's wouldn't be my favorite. And
Much political blather and weird sex.
There's not that much weird sex in the old, because they're from the 40s, and he couldn't get away with a lot of weird sex back then. But Lensman is another one I know I should probably like them, but I've never warmed to them the way I probably should have. I don't know why, they just don't work for me. Sorry, Dr. Biss, I mean, he's dead, it doesn't matter, but okay, I'm happy with this win. Also happy for Dr. Asimov, who hasn't gotten a Hugo yet, even though he's really one of those people who would have deserved one for a long time.
And by the way, we've bandied about the name Roger Zelazny quite a lot. So this is a fellow who came out of nowhere a few years ago, and I think he got nominated for the Hugo almost immediately for A Rose for Ecclesiastes, which is not my favorite story by him. He writes he's basically Hemingway for the science fiction world. And he's very deliberate, and he is set out to write a certain way to win awards and hearts. And when he does it well, I like him a lot. And Call Me Conrad was a fine story. And some of his other stuff is just so artificially impactful that I see the strings and it bothers me. But other people like it, and more power to them. I suspect Zelazny is going to be a big name for a while. Brunner is a big name too. I just don't think A Squares of the City was good. I want to shift to different topics because there's all kinds of different fans out there. We will eventually get to a most amazing, exciting TV pilot that we all watch together here at TriCon. But we're going to save that for later. Right now, I want to talk about comic books because some amazing things have happened this year in the world of comics. And I think there's no better person to introduce that than Jason. Tell us what happened this year. 1966
has been a fantastic year for comics. And a sad year for comics. As anyone who's been following Marvel Comics knows, Steve Ditko has just left Spider-Man and Doctor Strange. I think we've just gotten the second issue after Mr. Ditko left Spider-Man, for example. And it is an unfortunate event. I just don't think John Romita has it in him to be the artist Ditko was. And I'm really kind of heartbroken about that. Because especially as Doctor Strange work was so spectacular. On the good side, at Marvel, we had that I'm not sure how many people have been reading Fantastic Four, but that's been some of the best science fiction in comic book form, rather. First, we had the introduction of the Inhumans earlier this year, and then that was followed up very quickly by the emergence of Galactus as this giant cosmic creature ready to eat the Earth. Which resolved in a spectacular last issue climax. We then had issue 51, which was the Thing wrestling with his identity. And then that was followed up by the introduction of this intriguing new character called the Black Panther, who appears to be the king of a secret kingdom in Africa, very futuristic African kingdom. He's just such a fascinating seeming character, and so much in the beauty of our times. Outside of Marvel, we've had a number of great books coming out. Legion of Superheroes has recently jumped up quite a bit in quality. There's a new writer on it. His name, I think, is Shooter. Apparently he's a kid who's gotten to write some work for DC Comics. And I'll conclude my little rant here with talking about Warren Magazines has been publishing some fantastic work. They had a great war comic this year called Blazing Combat, which has included some of the best artists from the early EC days. And they've also been doing a horror book called Creepy. And rumor has it they have another series coming out called, I think it's Eerie, later this year, which have some of the great EC artists as well as some of the new cartoonists who are really making a show in the medium. They're the people who've been publishing Famous Monsters, and that work has been really, wonderful. A lot of great comics out, and I really feel like we're in the middle of a renaissance in that art form.
Between Daredevil and Captain America and the Avengers, and there's just a lot of really interesting characters in the Marvel pantheon. But it's not just about America. So one of the neat things about Galactic Journey is we have correspondents everywhere, including the UK and Germany and Australia. And so we have covered quite a bit of comics. In fact, Erica Friedman covered the fairly new field of manga. Cora, why don't you tell us a little bit about what's going on in European comics, some of your favorites?
Well, European comics, I wrote 2 long articles last year one about West and East German comics, and the other was about French, Belgian, Dutch comics. And some of the best comics at the moment in Europe are coming out of basically it's Belgium mostly because Belgium it's a small country and it's bilingual. Half speaks Flemish, which is basically Dutch with an accent, and the other half speaks French. And so every comic is translated, and so it's basically the Dutch, the Belgians, and the French read the same comics. And there's a lot of really amazing and very serious there. There are a lot more, not just superheroes, but they have adventures, war stuff, a lot of humor, more science fiction, westerns, and a lot of great stuff. Of my favorite, well, there's Asterix, which sounds really, really weird because it's basically about the rebellion of the Gauls against the Roman Empire. The Gauls were the people who lived in France before the Romans showed up. And this is about the rebellion of the Gauls against the Roman Empire, and it's done for laughs. It's full of political commentary. It's by Albert Uderzo and René Goscinny, and it's hilarious. Then another favorite is Blake and Mortimer, which is a Belgian comic by oh god, now I've forgotten his name. Edgar is his first name. Okay, but you can look it up. It's a duo. It's a scientist and a spy, and they deal with super science. Visit Atlantis. Of course, there's the all-time classic Tintin. Or do you have this in the UK with this Tintin? He's by Hergé. Been going since I think 1929 or something. It's a young reporter and his dog, his best friend, Captain Haddock, and they travel the world, have adventures.
I thought he was a member of the Thunderbirds team.
I don't think he is.
Thunderbirds are go.
Finally, may I put in a word for a really new artist, a young man named Jean Giraud. Sometimes he also goes by the name Möbius, which he uses for cartoons. And he's doing a Western comic called Lieutenant Blueberry. Okay, the name is goofy, Blueberry, but it's a great comic. If you've seen those Westerns from Italy, for example, the one with Clint Eastwood, which came out, I think we got it in Germany 2 years ago. Was it last year or 2 years ago? For a Fistful of Dollars is an American name, yes. And it's it's gritty, and everyone is unshaven. And this is basically the start. If you want that in comic form, read Jean Giraud's Lieutenant Blueberry. He's still very young, and I'm looking forward to what he will be doing next because he's an amazing artist from France.
I echo that. I picked those up in a local comic bookstore. They special ordered them for me. They're magnificent. He signs those as GIR. Not as Mobius, although I've heard comments in the fanzines about him doing work as Mobius as well, which I'm so intrigued by.
So Shannon in the audience, I see her raising her hand and whispering quietly so the rest of us can't hear it. She asked about music, and so I'm going to detour and talk about music real quick because, of course, pop culture is all part and parcel with each other, and of course, Lorelei has listened to the radio for the past many, many years, and so is very hip and with it and groovy, as the children say these days. So she asks about Good Vibrations, which is the latest Beach Boys sound. And in fact, we have heard that album. We own that 45 has just come out. But Pet Sound certainly presages that weird psychedelic effect. music is really different this year. Lorelei, tell us the biggest musical revolution you've heard recently.
I have to pick one. Oh goodness. Well, I definitely say that the Beatles are still pioneering some of the most modern sounds that I've ever heard. Just out of everything that I'm hearing, I think there's still a lot of remnants of the older sound of the sort of classic same progression and like singing about somebody's name over and over again. We're really starting to break away from that though into this new realm of experimental sounds and really interesting music and progressions and instruments. We listened to recently Donovan and Yardbirds albums, and though that one, they've got some really interesting sounds, but unfortunately not very interesting music. It's I will say that one sound repeated over and over does not warrant a song, but it's a bit of an unpopular opinion with my friends. I just listened to a new song recently that's been on the radio a lot, and I'm hoping to get the 45 of See You in September. And I really love some of the interesting things they do with layering in that song, layering the background singers and the vocalist and having different progressions for each. I think back like maybe a year or two ago, it was all just the background singers sort of echoing the vocalist. And now they're doing really interesting stuff with harmonies and all of those cool things. So definitely seeing the change. And I remember listening to Rubber Soul and just going, where did these people come from? Where did this sound come from? I've never heard anything like this before. And it's just come out of nowhere, it feels like. And it's super exciting living through that.
We caught a Rolling Stones concert out of Hawaii. I got a bootleg on reel to reel, and it was just, man, those guys can put on a show. We've seen them on Shindig too, and those guys are really cool. I just went through our album collection. The Who is pretty nifty. Of course, the Beatles have sort of invented this really interesting font that I'm starting to see emulated elsewhere that may become a signature of the 60s. I really dig the Byrds. They have an interesting sort of the transition from folk to folk rock that Dylan pioneered, and Jason likes Bob Dylan, and he is welcome to that opinion.
I'm sure he'll talk about him in a moment.
We'll have to cut off his mic feed. I'm sorry. And in the same vein, we have the Mamas and the Papas.
Yeah. Gideon, can I cut in here?
Yes, please.
I also wanted to note that there's an interesting new trend in music which is created from electronic instruments and other sounds which are things which are not traditional instruments. We have a couple of articles by Vicki Lucas on the Journey. She's very into new sounds and unusual experimental music, dance, plays, theater, movies. And so her articles tend to be about things that are pretty out there. But she had a really fantastic article about the theme for this show that is coming out in Great Britain. I know most Americans probably won't have heard of it. It's called Doctor Who. You might have heard some talk about it in the fanzines, and it's a educational scientific show that has become kind of a pretty popular there. Oh, they are bringing a movie out here, I guess. But the theme was entirely, I understand, composed by playing electronic sounds and then cutting the tape and layering it. It's very exciting. These new and unusual sounds that people are starting to bring into music, plus the influence of other cultures, which is starting to be integrated into music, it's a very new and different thing that is definitely revolutionary. There was very much a sense, like a couple of years ago, that things were were getting sort of stale, and that things were on the brink of changing, but we didn't really know what was coming. And then the Beatles hit the scene, and it really was very, very new and different.
I don't know how many folks out there who have seen Doctor Who. We have the advantage at Galactic Journey because we are an international organization connected by telefax machines and Intelsat satellites. We are funded by a unnamed but obviously possessed of high resources organization that we cannot name, but they have it's probably some clever name like Chaos or Schmersh or something. But we have a UK correspondent whose sole job is to cover Doctor Who when it comes out. And not only does she do so comprehensively, but also hilariously. So if you do not get a chance to watch Doctor Who, I strongly recommend the articles by Jessica Holmes. Now, she is actually, we've been lucky. She sent us some tapes of the opening, which was amazing.
When we say tapes, we mean, of course, audio tapes.
Correct, reel-to-reel tapes.
Right.
And also some promotional pictures. So Lorelei and I have actually experienced, if not watched, about the first half of the first season. And Lorelei, since that's fresh in your mind, I wonder what you thought of this Doctor.
I'm enjoying it. It's quite interesting. It's a bit difficult watching it, I'd say, with so fragmentary, but we get a couple 16 millimeters every now and then, which is nice. I'm finding the characters very compelling. The companions, Barbara and Ian, are very fun, and they're quite good contrast to the Doctor's character, who is a bit of an interesting take on having a protagonist who is not entirely likable, not entirely empathetic, and not entirely necessarily completely good all the time. And of course, Susan is adorable and beloved. And I'm just enjoying seeing all of the interesting worlds and times that the show explores. And I never know where the TARDIS is going to go next. So I'm excited to see.
Hopefully they'll bring it out here.
Well, yeah. And a lot of British shows have come out here. We have seen a lot of super marionation shows, although we have not gotten the Thunderbirds except on some local stations, but it hasn't been syndicated like Fireball XL5 and Supercar, which is interesting. We've gotten Danger Man. We've gotten the Avengers. Who here has seen Secret Agent with Patrick McGowan? All right, Janice.
Lorelei, raise your hand.
Would you like to gush a little bit about Danger Man?
It's a great show. Lorelei actually wrote a really excellent article on why Patrick McGowan is better than James Bond, or rather, why John Drake is better than James Bond, which I think says it all. But I really enjoy how moral John Drake is without being preachy. The show is incredibly respectful of its female characters. It's often has he doesn't play a role of a seducer, and they don't generally play the role of damsel in distress. They're treated as human beings, and who have important and interesting roles within the plot beyond sex object, which I really appreciate. There is, for the most part, other cultures are generally treated with respect. There are some cases where they will have white actors dress up as people of people from other countries, and that's not always ideal. But they also have many cases where people are played by actual members of various races that are actually played by people who are of that race. And this writing is clever and sharp, and John Drake is a very appealing, interesting character. The tech is fun and often feels more realistic than the sort of extreme gadgets in James Bond. It's a fun show overall, and I can definitely highly recommend it.
Shannon asks, has anyone heard about the crazy group of radio comedy folks called the Fire Sign Theater? She said a friend of hers in LA sent her a postcard about them, and He said he's going to record the next broadcast on his Ampex.
I have not heard of them. Jason, are they familiar to you?
I've heard just a tiny bit of chatter in the fanzine community about them being wacky, absurdist humor, but I have only heard like little bits and pieces
Nikki
about
Lucas
them.
might have heard of them. We'll have to ask her, although she's up in San Francisco, so I don't know. But I'll pass the word along and see, because if it's absurdist comedy, that would be right up her alley.
My closest thing to that would be like Tom Lear, who did the music for That Was the Week That Was, and then seems to have disappeared because the world just got too ridiculous to make fun of. Since we're talking about television, and I know, Cora, you'll only be able to talk in hearsay, but Jason and Janice and Lorelai and I just came out of the room where Gene Roddenberry showed us the pilot to his new show, Star Trek, which is going to be debuting on NBC. It's coming out a week early for preview week, and it will be on Wednesday at 8:30. And I hope you'll all tune in with us. And if you want to know how, just ask. So I would love to get everyone's first thoughts. All of us who've been watching television for the last 15 years of our life and reading science fiction for the last 20, 30 years of our life, how did this show impact you? What did you think of it? And I'll start with Jason.
I thought it was just a wonderful show. It's so smartly done, and it really kept my mind kind of hopping as to try and figure out what was going on with the plot. It was just wonderful how the plot kind of had multiple layers to it and never felt like it was talking down to us. So much science fiction, including Fantastic Voyage, unfortunately, tends to be a little bit of kid stuff, but this was certainly adult science fiction. I was struck by the fact that there were no villains of the piece. It was really kind of birthed out of a misunderstanding. And then more than that, I was really fascinated by the crew of, I can't remember the name of the spaceship. But the captain seems really kind of an interesting man, a little bit complicated. There's that weird kind of devil-looking guy with the ears pointing up and the eyebrows pointing up and the spiky ears. I didn't catch his name, but that's a character that I think just looks really intriguing. And then there's that woman character, number one, I think he calls her, the captain, who apparently is the first mate of the spaceship. And I thought it was really cool to have a cool dude in the way that they had a woman kind of be one of the leadership crew of the ship. So I was really intrigued by it. And if they can keep this cast together, I think they have a real future ahead of them.
Janice?
As you heard, we watched The Cage, which is the pilot which Gene Roddenberry just showed at TriCon here in 1966. And I understand that he's going to be showing a different one tomorrow called Where No Man Has Gone Before. And then when the season starts on Wednesday, it's going to be yet another one called The Man Trap, which all are intriguing names. For The Cage, my reactions, it's really exciting seeing it in color. I know most TV is now in color these days, but I'm having watched a steady diet of black and white for years, it's still a thrill to see it in color and to see science fiction in color, where they go down to this planet and see the pops of color of the flowers that they encounter and various other things. This is so it's just so vibrant, and it makes it so much more real. The effects were pretty great. They have a cool transporter effect, the sparkly effect, where they beam down from the ship to the planet. And as Jason said, I particularly loved the character of number one. I felt like her inclusion really elevated the show. There were over the course of the episode, there were 4 different women on the bridge in important positions. And at one point, number one is actually put in charge of the ship. She is the role of the captain. Well, when the captain is spoiler or not to give anything away, but when the captain is captured, number one ends up taking charge. And I've never seen a woman in a high level position like that, like as the leader of a vessel making decisions that affect the entire crew. It was so exciting to see and so unusual. I really hope to see more of her because she was just my favorite character. The story itself was interesting, and they actually had a couple of really interesting twists that I didn't expect. As Jason says, there are characters who appear to be villainous, but in the end actually have some sympathetic situations and are actually empathetic with humans in a surprising way. And there was a twist with one of the characters that I did not see coming and was very shocked by. So it was really quite a great experience, and I'm very much looking forward to seeing more of the show.
Jason notes that this is a serious show and not like, and he mentions Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea and Lost in Space, two contemporary science fiction shows. The difference is, of course, that those two shows are Irwin Allen shows. And Irwin Allen makes, well, crappy shows, although I understand the Time Tunnel is coming out this season. And it's an interesting premise, but it's an Irwin Allen show, so I'm not super excited about it. Whereas Star Trek is a Desilu production, and Desilu, well, Lorelei, tell us what Desilu shows you've been enjoying.
Recently we've been watching I Spy, and that, talk about good secret agent shows like Danger Man, has been so interesting to watch. It feels so modern and unlike anything I've seen on television before. It stars,
Robert
Culp and Bill Cosby. And they have a really interesting banter that feels so natural and unlike the super scripted shows that we've seen so far. It's all filmed on location, and they go all around the world. Currently, we're watching, I believe, are we watching real time or reruns?
We're watching the summer reruns.
Summer reruns of their time in Japan, and it's very interesting to see what it's like overseas right now, because of course we occasionally go over to watch all of the giant monster movies when they come out, funded by our lovely organization, but that I will not name. But it's just wonderfully done, and I mean I will say there are some good episodes, there are some not as good episodes, but it's worth it even just for the good episodes. And
it stars a black man.
Yes.
As the smart one.
Yes. Very diverse cast. Does not have the Danger Man problem of various colored faces of white people. It's always very close to always casting the right race for the character. I recommend it. It's a very fun show. And
I'm going to make some enemies here. Someone is talking about the Superman musical, which we actually just had a guest writer write a review of, and it was fascinating. And of course, Superman is big, but even bigger, and taking the country by storm. And I'm actually, so Lorelei is the age group that Batman is targeted at. I'd love to know what you think of Batman, Lorelei. And that's what she thinks of Batman, folks.
Well, you guys gave it a fair chance. I have to say, we've watched quite a few episodes before you were like, yeah, we've seen this.
The show is made for people that are younger than us, I just have to say that their casting choice for Batman, Adam West, I think is partly what killed the show. Because Burt Ward is a fantastic actor, and he does a great job as Robin, and even some of the villains are compelling at times, and I feel like they botched it.
Who would you have cast, Lorelei?
We just finished watching a wonderful show. Oh goodness, the name isn't coming to me right now. Burke's Law, and the main man of that, Gene Barry. I think he sort of had a Bruce Wayne suaveness to him in that show. I think he would have made a great Batman, sort of a fun tongue-in-cheek, but still mature and not, the sort of flat affect that Adam West has. But yeah, it's an unfortunate result, but I think one of the cheaper shows on television anyway. I think this new Star Trek that we saw the pilot for, bringing that back, is much more promising. Talk about ridiculous budgets. That episode, I've never seen a TV show that has the same equivalent budget as something like a movie like Forbidden Planet, which had gorgeous special effects. And
I got a little insider information that it cost Paramount $360,000 to make that pilot. So, and you can tell.
That's almost the year's budget of our secret organization. Crunch. Yeah, now Star Trek is something special. It combines the special effects of Forbidden Planet with an actual story and actors.
Yes.
Susan Oliver was much more compelling a character as Vina than Anne Francis was as Altera, I think her name was. I'm just going to tell you, I know you guys like Forbidden Planet out there. That was caca.
Well, Jason would beg to differ, I think.
Would you?
Or not Jason, I'm sorry. Some of the readers of the Journey would beg to differ.
Well, they can beg all they want. I enjoy it when people beg. It's becoming. Cora, obviously, this is all stuff you only know from hearsay, but based on what you have heard, what are your thoughts on the various TV phenomena in America?
Or good ones that are coming out in Germany.
Yeah. Well, we get American shows with a lag of 2 years if we're lucky, and sometimes it can be 5, 6. Sometimes we never get them at all. I do hope that I'll get to see the new Star Trek soon, because it sounds amazing, and I've seen some shots on behind the scenes photos, and it looks really, really great. What American shows we really have right now, we have Bonanza, which is hugely popular in Germany because Germans like westerns. Okay, I mean, I kind of like that Lorne Green guy. He's interesting. He would make a great starship captain someday. Perhaps I think, but right now he's playing Right now he's playing a cowboy. Okay, I'm not a huge western fan.
What would that be like?
Yeah, he would not. I'm not a huge western fan, and we do get the Avengers from the British show, or which got a different name here with and I quite like that one. I mean, the lady Emma Peel. What's the name of the actress? Diana something.
Diana Rigg.
Diana Rigg. Yes. She's great. She's great to look at. I also like her male partner. I think the name is Patrick McNee. John Steed is the character name. He's also more likable and more polite than James Bond. It's a fun show. One German show I like is Hafenpolizei, Harbor Police, which is a show which is basically a half-hour crime drama with really great plots and shot on location, mostly in Hamburg Harbor, sometimes here in Bremen, where I am. We also have a great music program called Beat Club, which is literally filmed here, and we can also see the music changing. They also have lots of their hit Sonny and Cher on, and Gary and the Pacemakers, so they don't just have, originally they only had a few local bands, which were fun, but now they have international big guns. But something that I'm really excited about is that we're getting a science fiction show of our own. It will be called Raumpatrouille Orion, or Space Patrol Orion, and apparently it's quite similar from what we've heard to Star Trek, because it's also a show about a spaceship and its crew. It's apparently the most expensive show on German television to date, and supposedly it looks really great, and it will debut, I think, on September 17th. So that's in a little over 2 weeks, and I'm really looking forward to that. And I will, of course, write about it for the Journey, so you can all enjoy it along with me. And so just as I can enjoy Star Trek, which debuts a few days earlier, along with you all.
So, Dee, how much time do we have left?
You have got about we're ending in about 10 minutes.
Okay, so I open up the floor to questions. Politics, music, science fiction, TV, anything you want us to talk about, we will. And I will just let you know that tomorrow we are going to be watching the second pilot of Star Trek at 4 p.m. Pacific, which is also Arizona time. So if you would like to join us, all you have to do is use your teletype and deliver a message to me, and I will tell you how you can join us for this once-in-a-lifetime experience.
Also, I see that Shannon points out that some people see Batman as like pop art, like Andy Warhol, and I will agree that it does pop like a balloon that is deflating and dying slowly.
I've got something to talk about.
I suspect she's thinking more of Roy Lichtenstein, who's actually the guy who does these amazing, who does these comic paintings, which look really great. I wrote an article about modern art and pop art. It was last year sometime.
Oh, don't make me angry, Cora.
Yeah, but okay. What I know what you're going to say. The annoying thing about Roy Lichtenstein is that he copies existing comic panels and doesn't credit the original artist, which is of course a pretty shitty thing to do, especially since Roy Lichtenstein is high art. The original artist is someone who gets a couple of dollars from DC or Marvel or whoever. It's not superhero stuff he does. He does mostly romance comics and so on. And of course that's mean. The idea is great. It would be lovely if he could actually credit the people who created the art.
And that is mentioned in Cora's really excellent article too.
To cross over television and comics, I was seeing in the latest issue of Daredevil that this week or next week there's going to be a whole slew of Marvel cartoons debuting on television. And I think there's also a Superman cartoon coming out.
I'm so intrigued by those Marvel cartoons because rumor has it they adapt the original comics.
Really?
I'm very curious about those. As well, there's also rumor of a Spider-Man cartoon that may be coming out, which also at least is promised to have the comic villains. Having not seen any of them, I don't know what the quality is going to be. I'm not holding my breath that they'll be outstanding based on the other work we've seen from the Hanna-Barbera and Brett Ray and Lawrence animation studios. This is not exactly the Chuck Jones era of animation, aside from the actual Chuck Jones animations that we're getting to enjoy. So that might be the subject of a future article.
Yeah, actually, that would be wonderful. I know that there's going to be a Captain America. I know there's going to be a Submariner. There's going to be Iron Man. And the Hulk. The Hulk is getting one.
Yeah.
And so some of these are classics and some of them are pretty new. The Hulk, for instance, I think came out in '62, back when he was gray for a while, and then he became green. He was only the Hulk at night, or like a full moon, or was it? It was like a weird werewolf thing.
The first six issues of the Hulk were basically all different tries for different ideas. Stanley had tried different Hulk stories in the past with giant monsters. So, this is just another giant monster. They never quite got their footing till the character moved over to Tales to Astonish. It's been pretty good lately. But yeah, it's pretty amazing that these Marvel characters are moving to the small screen after only 4 years or less on the comic pages. Submariner and Captain America are older, but the revivals are new. And, most kids these days have never heard of the early stuff. So this is pretty exciting. It's a sign of Marvel's growth in the world.
And to wrap things up on a similar note, one of the Hugo Awards was for Best Artist. And while Edgar Rice Burroughs did not win for Best Series, Edgar Rice Burroughs essentially got two backdoor Hugos. One was that the ERB Dom won the Best Fanzine over some fan favorites like Yandro and Zenith. But the other is there were a lot of best artists that you would recognize if you read the magazines. Everyone from Jack Gauguin to my favorite John Schunher, who did the very dramatic Dune drawings on the cover of Analog, and of course Kelly Frias, who's a family friend of ours. I was sad that M. Schwiller wasn't on there, but he also hasn't done very much last year. But the winner of the Hugo for Best Illustrator was Frank Frazetta, and that was very surprising because he did almost nothing last year. But what he did the year before was all the Edgar Rice Burroughs books that had come out, all the Tarzan books and the Princess of Mars type stuff. And he did those beautiful swashbuckling, barely clad covers. And I understand he is doing the covers for the Lancer Conans, which are coming out at the end of the year. So I think there was just such a big ERB fandom out there that, that they made sure he was going to get a Hugo somehow, even if not quite in name.
Well,
I did it
Frazetta is
warning.
at least still alive to enjoy it, and the people who do the ERB scene are also still alive. And I actually prefer Hugos to go to people who are alive to enjoy them. And I think Frazetta is eventually going to be a really big name, but he's still a beginner right now. He's very, very talented, obviously. He draws human muscles and skin like no one else in the business. I'm really excited to see his take on Conan, because the only takes so far we've seen are from the original Weird Tales stories. The interior artist was, I think, Hugh Rankin and Harold DeLay, who were not bad. And the cover artist was Margaret Brundage, who's amazing. She's Margaret Brundage is amazing at drawing scantily clad women. She's not so great at drawing men. So Conan does only features. I think she illustrated. Oh, sorry about that. She illustrated like I think 8 or 9 Conan stories, and she only illustrated Conan 3 times, and he's never very impressive. The women are a lot more interesting, so I'm really interested in seeing someone who apparently likes drawing muscular men showing his take on Conan. So I'm happy for Mr. Frazetta, though I would have personally voted for John Schönherr, because John, is it his first name? Okay.
John.
Yes, I would have, because his Dune illustrations, whatever you think of the books, illustrations and covers were great.
So we're wrapping up here, and I just want to say that Galactic Journey is in fact eligible for the best fanzine. So if any of you are WorldCon members or plan to be next year I understand it's going to be in New York or some other big metropolis in the United States. Remember that best fanzine is spelled GALAC. No, but seriously, we would love it. There were several years we were told we were going to be on the Hugo ballot, and yet we did not appear on the 63, 64, or 65 Hugo ballots. We were very disappointed. We assume it was just a misprint. So let's work really hard to get Galactic Journey on the ballot this year. We would very much appreciate your support. And it's support like yours that makes sure that the secret organization Crunch can provide quality program like this. Where else can you get quality programming like this? And by the way, to very much wrap things up, although I'll give everyone 20 seconds to say their final piece, we have covered Dark Shadows. You can, Victoria Silverwood wrote an article on Dark Shadows, which is coming out right now. All right, final thoughts. Janice, 20 seconds.
What he said about Galactic Journey, one thing I enjoy about working on Galactic Journey is we have such a large variety of contributors on such a broad variety of subjects. So if you want to check out the journey and learn more about it, if you go to the sidebar on the site, there's a list of topics like comics, politics. He hasn't even mentioned all of the science articles about the moonshot, the effort to get to the moon and various things that are really excellent. And plus, we have a very a wide variety of authors who participate on the site. So
Space Historian who gives us our articles. And Shannon, we do take submissions. We cannot publish everything we get, but the article on Superman the Musical was in fact a submission. And we're a big snowball. So many people who were fans of the journey have become members of the journey. There's 20 of us now across the country, every gender, demographic, age you can think of. We do it. So yes, feel free to get in contact with me. Jason, your 20 seconds of thoughts.
I'm just going to kind of share my love for writing for the journey. I think it's exciting to be part of such a strong writing group. I just love being part of this project. And I don't have much more to add to that. Thank you.
Cora.
Well, I also love writing for the journey and bringing West German and sometimes East German, because I have family there and occasionally visit, perspective to the journey. And also Also, I would love to see us on the Hugo ballot for real sometime. They told us 3 times we were nominated. They told me 2 times. They even sent me 2 nice pins. But the best fan writer isn't even on the ballot this year. And I'm kind of disappointed, even if I would have lost to some of those people who write about Edgar Rice Burroughs, like this young fellow, Mike Resnick. I think he's like 22. Michael Resnick. He's kind of promising, but okay, I and yes, if you read the journey, you can see me cover Space Patrol Orion in real time when it comes out, and I'll also be covering the Conan reprints because I'm a big fan, and I hope Lynn Carter hasn't messed it up too badly. And then, well, whatever comes, and I'm really looking forward to 1967, which looks to be an exciting year.
And Lorelei, 5 seconds.
All right. Watch Star Trek either at your TV sets at home or in our group watchings. I have to say it is the show that I didn't know I needed. So I highly recommend it.
All right. And with that, thank you very much. Thank you, Dee. Thank you, TriCon and CoKoCon, for having the Galactic Journey. And thank you all for coming.
Thank you for joining us. It's been a wonderful panel, and we absolutely would love to have you guys back.
Well, we'd love to be there in person next time because
Hopefully.
satellites have limited bandwidth and we don't want to take away from the government.
We'll get those time traveling machines all fixed up, and we'll be happy to present you out here when you get over here.
Lovely. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for coming to the panel.
I hope this was recorded, but I'd love to share this with people after the fact.
Well, hopefully, fingers crossed, it recorded well. So
it was recorded, so hopefully it came through.
All right. See you later.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.